Dr. Satyam Priyadarshy. Mr. Priyadarshy here is the Managing Director, Technology Fellow, and Chief Data Scientist at Halliburton. He has about 30 years experience, Satyam, is that about right? At least in the data science realm. Also, what's interesting is Dr. Priyadarshy has also been a professor at both George Mason and Georgetown, and most recently at Virginia Tech and a host of others. And we'll talk a bit about his role as a professor, as well as what he does for his day job at Halliburton, how he balances the two, and what he does there. But so sort of starting there, one thing I want to talk just a little bit about is, given your background in education, how do you feel that you're able to that balance between being a professor and taking some of that, maybe that teaching and coaching ability? How has that influenced you as a leader?
Absolutely. So one little correction, I am a managing director of India Center for Halliburton, not the whole Halliburton, because that will be a much bigger organization. So I run the data science center and a small center in Bangalore. And of course, technology fellow and chief data scientist. I'm based out of US, but I operate the India center from here. And that's been an additional responsibility as of last year. So now coming to being an academics, I think it's a wonderful experience and knowledge gaining place, right? Being an academics. And typically people leave academics, go to industry and just build a career there. For some reason, I could not do that. I was a full-time faculty, and then I switched from being a computational quantum chemist to being a technologist, and then eventually becoming an executive to turn around some companies. But in the whole process, after I did my MBA, I decided enough of teaching science and computers, let me go teach some management. And that's how I ended up teaching at the School of Business at George Mason University, where I was an adjunct for about 7 years. And I taught courses on managing information systems and things like that. I have no degree in computer science, or I don't even have a course on computer programming in my record. I'm a physical chemist turned into a quantum chemist, and worked in various fields of computational science. And then digital marketing was, since I became an executive and as a head of analytics, I was looking at all the marketing stuff. And that's when I started teaching digital marketing strategy at Georgetown. And later on, today I teach at Business School of Virginia Tech, and I'm an adjunct faculty at Computer Science Department of Oklahoma State as well. But also in some university in India, and a visiting lecturer to many places, one-off lectures here and there, or a boot camp, so to say. But that's all for fun. The reason why I do that is two reasons. One is, when I left full-time academics, my parents and my PhD advisor were very unhappy, sort of, saying, how come you can leave an academic job, So, right. But you have to do things that are good for your family and overall. So I decided that I'll keep a job as a faculty, and that makes my family happy, like my father especially. But also it's a passion, right? Main thing is you learn a lot from younger generation or the students, because you would think that you know something, but when they ask you the question, that makes you think very differently. A simple term could be really challenging to explain. And that is the whole game of data science, if you think of it. Data science is not about building a histogram and talking, that the sales is going north and south in the most American, if you look at the marketing presentations, they will say north and south, but it's a numerical number. Is it going up 10% or 12%, right? But we call it north and south, which is a business speak, which is fine. But if you have to explain it to somebody, and a student doesn't understand what north and south is, then you have to explain to them in a different way. And so simple concepts, multiple ways to explain it, is the art of data science.
Yeah. And I'm glad you sort of bucked the trend. There's this awful phrase that those who can't do teach. So you're doing both. You're teaching and you're also leading a team. How has that ability to talk to your students and to teach them concepts. How have you applied that to your role as a leader? I mean, do you find yourself doing, sort of getting into teaching mode when you're talking to your business counterparts?
Absolutely. So I'll give you one example which still fascinates me. This is roughly about 15, 20 years ago. I was in one of the internet companies, the giants, and we were looking at a competitive intelligence data which we generated. And in order to simplify that chart, I made what is called a box and whiskers diagram.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody in high school learns about it. And I shared it with my senior vice president at that time. And he says, how do I interpret this?
Yeah.
So, and, I just said him that, you have probably studied this in high school.
But you forgot. Yeah.
Right. So I had to I have to actually create a slide, how to interpret slides.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And that's a fascinating part, because if you look at it, while there is a reason for it, right? Most executives, they don't have enough time to really go spend time as a scientist would do it, and hence you have to explain to them in like 30 seconds, if you want to call it that number. All right, it's within the attention span where they can digest things. As I teach my team that whenever you create slides, the slide should be like a kindergarten.
Yeah.
Right. Well, 4 words, 5 words, but the story should be there.
Right. And we don't mean to put down our executive counterparts. They're vital. But I hear what you're saying, because what I found too is, and I'm curious if you see the same thing, is when you're forced to boil something down, when you're forced to simplify it down to a simple sort of takeaway, you actually find that you have to explain it. That also can be a sort of a way in which you get deeper into the analysis to really boil it down. I mean, have you found that to be a helpful technique with your data science leaders?
Absolutely. If you can't explain things in a very simple terms, that means you have difficulty understanding it. And this is a concept most physicists already know. Like the world is 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. We can't explain 2-dimension very well. So what they do is they will say, let's solve a problem in 1 dimension first.
Right.
And then it's much easier to explain. Then you can say in 1 dimension, this is an exact proof. In 2 dimension, this is a proof. And in 3rd dimension, this could be the proof, right? But it's a complex problem that you have boiled down to a simple dimension. And in business world, the simple dimension is how simply can you give your story, which will make decision making much faster and more effective. And that is an art and a skill that one has to learn, and it works very well. And I think this teaching ability is really very powerful.
That's great. But I can see, given your background, like you participating as an adjunct professor in a number of different universities, that's certainly helped you. But how do you impart that onto your team themselves? I mean, certainly a slide is a great takeaway, right? And teaching to a kindergartner. But is there any is there training that you can go? Because sometimes you can have data scientists who are just absolutely phenomenal data scientists, but when you ask them to explain their work, they fall all over themselves.
Yeah, because I think it's also I think it's an organizational challenges, I would call it. Almost all the data scientists who work in my center of excellence in oil and gas industry, almost all of them actually teach, like whether in university or internally. Because when I started this, and especially in oil and gas industry, 2014, if you think of it, that's when I started, and I started building team. Explanation was difficult. First explanation was what data science will do to us. Because if you talk to most oil and gas leaders, they will tell you, oh, we have been using data for a long time, and we have the we have the largest volume of data in petabytes. All those things are true to only to an extent. But its application, its value creation has been a challenge. One of the examples I give, the industry talked about what is called digital oil fields 25 years ago, roughly. And there is not a single digital oil field, right? It's not just having the concept, it is actually connecting and creating value. So when we built this data science team, the question was, how do I explain to people what we are doing and how it's valuable? And as a result, we saw that a lot of domain knowledge is needed. Data scientists have the data science concepts very well, but no domain knowledge. So if you want to communicate with the domain experts, you have to understand that bridge between data science and the domain. And as a result, most of my data scientists became like you can call it a mentor and a coach. And we actually built industry's first series of boot camps to train people across the industry. Over the last, I would say last 4 years, we may have trained about 1,000 people around the world in many companies. And so these are all practicing data scientists who actually build models for living, write the results, write a story. And one of the things that most of them know, that when you write the slides, the story is like a movie script.
That's great. That's great advice.
Because if you think of a movie script, is very specific, right? It's not like a blabber going on for too long. Every sentence has a meaning, its impact, its value. So you write the script. So even if somebody, you are not in front of the audience or the internet connection is down, if they were to read that movie story, they could say the full storyline. As a result, when they're practicing data scientist and then they do the teaching, it is much more powerful. And hence we have been very successful. In fact, that was not even our revenue stream, and now we have built that into a revenue stream now. But the most important part of this was that we were doing these boot camps in a highly contextualized manner. So one can actually go take a data science course on one of the MOOCs basically. But what we found that people can't translate that into reality.
Right.
Very few percentage. We all know that percentage is such a small percentage. Millions of people join a course, but how many actually complete and take it forward? That percentage is very low historically. But in the case that we have, this is pretty much. In fact, I really try to put my data scientist into one of these boot camps within first 6 months of their work.
Yeah. In these boot camps, what is the specific output that you'd love to see? Maybe it's all of the above, but is it like the ability to take your data, your data science work and turn it into a graphical presentation, like some visualization? Is it actually writing a document that you would hand off to your business counterparts, or is it like a deck, like a slide deck, or it could take all forms? But generally speaking, what is the form of sort of the output of your team?
Yeah, so I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that. One of the things that we developed over the last 6 years is a concept called smart digital, and we publish those things actually in articles. But the concept is that how do you take somebody from one point in the journey to the end of the journey, so to say, right? It's not about just giving them here is an algorithm or here is a software that you want to do. It is actually trying to understand what business problem we are talking about, right? How do you come up with that, which problem you will be solving? And so this whole concept is built as a smart digital workshop. And so most of the people that we train internally is to become an expert in that smart digital workshop. So that when they're talking to, since we are a service company and we talk to customers, when they talk, they can talk intelligently about it. Because it's not a question of, you want to do a project. It's not useful. It's a question is, what am I going to do which will help the business?
Right. What business problem?
We are a business. Yeah. We are not full academic institute that you can write papers and nothing to do with it, only a list, right? But here in business, everything is tied to dollars and cents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
as a result, we take people, we mature them and monitor them as a cohort. So they do actually projects and actually deliver the results. And then whether with or without a partner, or they will actually come up with the full project plan as to, we want to solve a specific problem. And this is how we will approach it. And this is how the results will look like. And in 3 months, 6 months, they will actually present it to the cohort.
And will you actually also talk about ROI in that? Like, this is the expected ROI if we were able to increase the accuracy of the model, what have you?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are about 5 or 6 different financial metrics that we can look at: accuracy, efficiency, NPV, things like that. Yep. So any project that is thought out has to have one of those financial metrics associated with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I mean, going back to one of the things that you said about petabytes of data, I sort of chuckle from time to time when I hear that from data science leaders, because it's not about that. It's about what I'm hearing from you is about the insights, is about the business value you're driving. You can have all the data in the world, but if you're not deriving insights and you're not turning that into the changes in decision-making process or improve predictability and forecasting or whatever, then it's not really worth much. So that's very, very interesting. I'd like to segue a little bit. One of the things that, talking about teaching and talking about some of the programs and the boot camps that you've created, I know also you have done a phenomenal job in increasing diversity amongst your data science team. And I have some stats I'll just throw out here for our listeners here. But this is a 2018 BCG research report, and 55% of university graduates, I assume this is around the world, are women. 35% of women have a STEM degree. So STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math. And then 25% of the STEM workforce is female. And then 15 to 22%, I've seen 18%, I've seen in that range of data science professionals are women. So in the data science community, and I'll speak as a sort of representative of the data science community, we're doing an awful job, really, of creating a diverse sort of workplace when it comes to data science. But you, however, have figured some things out here. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so since I've been teaching for quite some time, as well as actually building data science or analytics or data monetization teams for a long time, there are some inherent talent when it comes to pattern recognition, and diversity really helps there. As a result, in fact, when I started building the team, one of my first hires was like a PhD in atomic physics with astrophysics background, things like that, and she has not worked in oil and gas industry before. Now, people, if you look at what the job descriptions are like, most people put out for data scientists, they want a rock star in Hadoop and programming and machine learning and AI.
Good luck.
I'm not looking for such people.
Right.
I'm looking for people who can actually do problem solving and can bring some diversity of thought in looking at the patterns that we will be creating from the data. And as a result, the team I built, we had people with astrophysics background, we had from MBA, we had chemical engineering, computer science, and things like that, different fields, right? In both, but irrespective of the gender, the field itself was diverse.
Right.
As I said, my background is quantum mechanics or quantum chemistry, right? I've worked in various fields. I never got blocked because of that. I get blocked for different reasons,
right.
But I do not. At least I could do things in the technology world or in executive suite with that degree. So when we built the team, we were very focused on how do we bring women into the fold, and we were very successful. At one point, we were at 50%, and recently, since I took over the India Center in Bangalore, I have just made offers of 66% women with masters in computer science around, and I've hired people from all around India. I'm looking for the thought process. I'm looking for openness to learn new things, and everything else is all you can actually train people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there's some, there's certainly different schools of thought in terms of should you be hiring people who have like that diverse background and don't come out of college with a specific data science degree or a strong statistical background. I mean, obviously you need to have some grounding in either coding or math or problem solving in general. And it sounds to me like you are looking at folks who have people coming out of college who do have diverse majors, if you will, and I assume you have to train them. I mean, at some point, you have to train them on data science. So how have you been accomplishing that?
So, couple of things. One is, even for the senior people that I've hired, experienced people who were like, say, chemical engineer, and they've done quite a bit of work. in the industry or outside the industry. But what I'm looking for is what their problem solving skills are, whatever programming they may have done. And are they open to learning new programming techniques, right? We don't want to tie them down to, just use Python or R or something like that. That's
Right.
not the criteria. In fact, many of my hires have been literally fresh out of college, even in US, and talking to them, what have you done? What project have you done? How have you approached it? They turn out to be fantastic employees and team workers but the main important thing is they should know how to teach others as well.
I love
So
that.
when we hire the so-called early career, they are always paired with some senior people, and very quickly they pick up. And then this boot camp methodology of teaching others works automatically in favor of me. So I reduce my productivity life cycle to very short time range, and people are more productive that way, and they're interested. The thing is, if you give them a monotonous job, okay, go run neural network every day, I can guarantee you most data scientists will get bored.
Right. Yeah, I have always had the philosophy, if you're not learning, you're leaving. And, clearly if you have a culture of coaching, if you have a culture of learning, and you have an expectation that you also have to, to pay it forward, right? So you have to, not just should you be learning something new, and maybe taking on a different project maybe your last project was building out a deep learning classifier, and then the next project might be sort of a forecasting project, right? So keeping those skills fresh, I think, is very important. But then also like creating a culture of them becoming teachers. So I imagine, if I had to guess, like some of your students then become teachers and mentors as they grow in your organization. So is that correct? Is that assumption correct?
Absolutely. So some of we have been as I said, we are running global boot camps, right? So I'm not everywhere. Some of my team members are like leading those things. Somebody in Japan, somebody is in Australia, somebody is in India, Indonesia, right? So I'm not there anymore.
Right.
These are the team members who worked with me or working with me, and they lead these their own their sessions, right?
Right.
I don't have to be involved day to day. And for 6 years, I can tell you that it has been a great rewarding journey for us in that sense. And they figure out their own, depending on what context they are trying to build the boot camp, they can figure out. Now they know the methodology, they know how to deliver, right? And cultural differences across from Japan to Europe to South Asia to America is very different. So
Right.
they learn how to deliver in these areas.
Yeah.
So,
Do you ever worry about you have a globally distributed team, right? You also, like you just mentioned, that you can't be everywhere. You sort of micromanaging all the content that's being produced. But is there some governance that you're putting in place to ensure that the methodology is sort of to your best practices? Like, do you worry at all about some mentor or some leader in Japan creating a siloed process?
No, that part, because since I'm part of the center of excellence, everything boils down to that. But there is no need to micromanage. I think the trust in people is very important, and I personally believe that the team that I have, I trust them, and so I don't see that as a challenge.
Yeah.
And they should have independent thinking to do that, but at the same time they are fully aware what within the governance framework that exists at a highest level of the business, we will stay within that. And like things like that, for example, one of the key concept in oil and gas is you don't share any data, right? So everybody knows that, and people will not do such a thing, right? So I think that's what it is. Otherwise, I never believed in micromanagement because it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think there's very few who believe in micromanagement. I think sometimes people don't realize that they are micromanaging. So you always have to be self-aware like that. I'm glad you're in that camp too. One thing that was sort of switching gears. One thing I want to throw out here is I love the time machine sort of type questions. So if you were to go back, say 10, 15 years, maybe earlier in your career, what would you tell your 15 year ago self based on what you've learned today?
Well, I don't know. I grew up in India, and I came with a certain philosophy in mind, and I still keep to that philosophy basically. And that philosophy is that you have to, what you want to achieve, don't worry about others. What you want to achieve, you figure out a path to achieve it, because nobody will take you there. You have to take yourself, right? And as a result, when I left academics and joined a corporate world, very quickly I learned that there happens to be a what is called a corporate structure and things like that. And that's when I said, oh my God. And then I learned, oh, there is something called a CEO. That's when I made it. Then within 6 months of that job, I decided that I want to be in this C-suite in 10 years time, because I calculated based on books you read. Oh, right. At a certain age, you have to do these things. And I had already spent so much time in academics. But the day I joined reporting to a CEO and a chairman, that was 9.5 years into my 10-year plan. So I've done everything, whether it's teaching, whether it's learning new skills, or whatever it is, because I didn't have any godfather in America. So in fact, I was told that you can never become a leader in this country. So, so you have to figure out, you can figure out your path yourself. But at the same time, you should have enough freedom to do, as I give to all my team members, they should really figure out the path. We only show them the how to achieve it, but they can actually build their own path.
There's a lot of good thoughts in there. I mean, first of all, you clearly persevered. I mean, coming into this country and facing some naysayers who said like, oh, you can only get so far, and being able to obviously be phenomenally successful and be a C-suite type executive as well. The second thing that you're saying is you really have to take ownership for your destiny. And my guess is in that 10-year plan, there's a lot of hard work that went in on your behalf to make it to where you ended up after those 10 years. And I think, if anyone any of our guests were to go and Google you and look at your LinkedIn profile, it is quite impressive. Not just the teaching aspect, but the roles that you've had and the accomplishments that you've made. So very excited to hear that success story. And then I think speaking of mentors, one other sort of question I'm just curious about, for those DSLs out there or aspiring DSLs, have you had a mentor in your career that has helped you along the way? I mean, you mentioned that like you really got to do it on your own and you didn't have a godfather, but was there anybody out there who you sort of leaned on, or did you really go it alone?
So, those who have heard me or when I speak on the stage, I have a slide for that. Actually, nothing happens without that. And I think contribution, as I say, after my parents is my teachers from my primary school to the PhD, and especially my PhD advisor and 2 postdoc advisors that I had. They're all there. Had a big role in that because, as I said, I'm a physical chemistry graduate. And then I did my PhD in quantum mechanics, which is a field that very few people want to enter. And he was a genius. Who I did my PhD in India, but he did his PhD in University of Virginia, and he did his PhD in 2.5 years at UVA, and went back to India. So you can imagine, like, it's very difficult field, but the way he trained without pressure, without micromanaging, as to how to think of problem solving. And one of the things that he did early on after 2 years or 2.5 years of PhD, he said, you have to publish a paper in a different field than the PhD topic, which is rare in many cases. That basically wired me to think of multiple problems at the same time. So I owe a lot of my success to my PhD advisor, is Professor S.N. Datta of IIT Bombay. Amazing personality, genius, but at the same time knew without like shaped you in a way that you can think of most complex problems and not to be worried about it. And then my 2 postdoc advisors, one in Australia and one in US, because I went and changed my fields of research completely, which is very rarely people do that.
Right.
And so they accepted me for what I brought and let me flourish in the field that I chose to work with them, and pretty successful in those areas as well. So I think that is my foundation when it comes to taking teams of diverse people, because these people took me from a different field, let me grow, right? And we had been very successful in that. So in that sense, a lot of mentors come along. In the business world, there are a few people that have certainly contributed, and most of the work that I talk about is teamwork. Like since 1999, from AOL days to now, it's not a one-person job, because in corporate world, teamwork is very important.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you underscored it. Clearly, your ability to from getting a PhD in quantum chemistry, and then even changing it within getting your PhD and then beyond, and becoming a data science leader, that taught you. You learned from that. You learned that people from diverse backgrounds and diverse sort of expertise can move into the world of data science if they're given the right level of mentorship. And the fact that you highlighted a bunch of mentors along the way who happen to be in academia tells me that that teaching mentality from you has really been a huge part of your career. And I think for those DSLs out there, I think that's a great lesson learned here, is that you can coach, you can teach, and to create a high-performing team. And then lastly, if I thought that I could get a PhD in only 2.5 years, I probably would have gotten my freaking PhD. So, but that is quite impressive. Most people I know who have PhDs took 2 to 3x that. So
that was my PhD advisor, not me.
I know. Talk about your advisor. Yeah, absolutely.
I worked for 3.5 years for my PhD.
That's impressive. Yeah.
So. But I think it's, again, as I said, the shaping of the mindset is very important in this case.
Yes,
and that has worked very well for me.
Well, Dr. Priyadarshy, this has been just a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I hope many of you out there feel the same way. We learned a lot about the teaching background and how that's influenced your career. We learned a bit about some tips and techniques in terms of how you're actually presenting those materials, and how your background in teaching has helped present materials to folks who are not data scientists, but who are very influential and people who we need to win over in order for us to keep our jobs. And then last but not least, we also learned about some techniques in terms of increasing a diverse workforce, and not just diverse in thought and in background, but also from a demographic perspective. And getting more women into the data science realm, I think, will absolutely help and create better and more high performing teams. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Hopefully, it was a lot of fun. You had as much fun as I did. So thank you very much, Dr. Priyadarshy.
Thank you, Dave. It was wonderful. I hope anybody wants to talk about it. Sure.
Yeah, look Dr. Priyadarshy up on his LinkedIn page. I don't know if you have Twitter or any other social media, but I'm sure you can be found there. Is there any handles that you want to mention?
Twitter is same as my last name, Priyadarshy.
Priyadarshy on Twitter. Send him questions directly. Again, very happy to have you on the show, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much.